Hello, everybody. Welcome to Appreciating Poetry with me, Dr. Kelly. We've been looking at the Songs of Innocence by William Blake. And I would just like to review some of the things we've been talking about. There's innocence in the real world. Here is the real world in the picture. There's a little boy and he's naked, and little children love to be naked. And he's talking to a lamb, and one of the things he says to the lamb is that the lamb has clothing of delight, soft as clothing, woolly bright. But the clothing of a lamb is part of the lamb. Clothing for a little boy is stuff that has to be added on, and he doesn't need that. He does without that. He asks the little lamb the first question that we learn in catechism, which is, who made you? And the answer is very kind of mixed up. The little boy says, little lamb, who made thee? And then he says a little later on, little lamb, I'll tell thee. So the little boy knows that he knows, and he's going to tell the lamb. He asked the lamb the question as if the lamb could answer, but it's obvious that the question is really just a pretext for the boy to demonstrate his knowledge or kind of process his knowledge. And I can tell you as a teacher that when you teach somebody else, you learn a lot more than you learn more than you thought you knew. So the answer to the question, who made thee, is just this very tangled up thing. He is called, he just doesn't say God. The boy says, he is called by thy name, for he calls himself a lamb. He is meek and he is mild. He became a little child. I a child and thou a lamb. We are called by his name. So everybody's named Lamb. The Creator's named Lamb. He gets to call himself Lamb. But the child and the lamb are called Lamb. They don't call themselves Lamb. They are called Lamb. So I guess the important point is that the child doesn't consider anything outside his immediate environment. What he experiences is just a world that resembles himself. So at first, he talks to the lamb as another person. And he talks about the lamb's delightful qualities, the clothing woolly bright, and the tender voice that makes all the vales rejoice. In the second stanza, I shows up, ego shows up, little lamb, I'll tell thee. So, when we do stuff, when we take action in the world, we gain experience. And I think it's a very important point that the gaining of experience doesn't mean the losing of innocence. It's just experience sort of accumulates. Now, I guess it's quite possible that the accumulation of experience can sort of cover up innocence, obscure innocence, it sort of grows or accretes on innocence, and maybe one can fall out of touch with innocence. But as we saw with the shepherd, right, there's sort of innocence hovering in a cloud above us. And I'd like to look at some of the design features of these printed pages that Blake made himself. Got the title The Lamb, and these embracing willowy branches over the top, and these viney tendrils, these spiral shapes that just proliferate in this picture, one wrapping around the very slender stem of the vegetation. Two little branches growing in between the two stanzas, but the two stanzas are not separated by this by these two branches growing toward each other. There's this gap between them. And the first stanza in The Lamb is more innocent or less experienced, I guess, than the second stanza. The first stanza is who gave you these delightful qualities, the soft wool and the delightful lamb's voice. Second stanza, I'll tell you, separation of I and you. But the world is not radically divided by even in the design. So there's these two branches between the two stanzas, but they don't meet. Overarching the whole scene is this sort of protective embrace of the vegetation. If we look back at the Piper, we see that the vegetation is more realistic in the Piper, but we have a very similar design of innocence above and experience below. At the top is the child on the cloud. Again, we see the embrace of the vegetation, the canopy above the Piper. It's more realistic than the crazy willowy plants in the Lamb, but we sort of see some gestures in that direction, similar kind of embrace. And again, this spiral shape on one pair of tree trunks on the right-hand side of the picture. So pure innocence. It's just impossible innocence. Impossible because nobody's that, you know, the minute you're born, you're starting to gain experience. But this child is on the cloud. And I'm perfectly happy to say that this child is the innocent part of the shepherd who's an adult, a responsible adult. He has to take care of the sheep. But this child is still hovering above him, tells him what to do, tells him to pipe a song about a lamb, to sing the song and add words to them, sit down and write a book, and then the child vanishes. That's where experience sort of reaches a tipping point. Now, experience is in the service of innocence because the piper is going to write the book that every child may joy to hear. But the child on the cloud doesn't want to witness the plucking of the plant to make the pen, the staining of the water to make the ink. If we look at the frontispiece of Songs of Innocence, similar dual design with sort of crazy, unworldly, otherworldly images of innocence at the top, and sort of foliate parts sort of reaching over each other. And the real world, the absolutely real world on the bottom. You know, so this is, the top here is the imaginary ideal world of innocence that's completely untouched by experience. But in the real world, innocence depends upon experience. And we see that with the mother and the children. We again see these twiny things here, a narrower piece of vegetable matter winding around the tree trunk. I want to look especially at this bird with its outstretched wings. Now, we look at, we're going to see that bird again. Now, we're going to take a look at the frontispiece from Songs of Experience. So here's Songs of Experience. And again, we see these spirals. We see the foliage reaching out to meet, doesn't quite meet. And now we see adults, but this is very interesting, female and male. And they look to be having a great time. The woman on the left wearing a pink dress is looking at us. The man on the right, who's wearing nothing much, if he's wearing anything, it's sort of like the outfit the Piper wears. He looks pretty naked to me. So I think it's not stretching too much to say this is innocence in adulthood. And the representation of innocence in adulthood is the attraction of male and female. They're reaching out toward each other, but they're defying gravity too, just like the child on the cloud. So this is an imaginary vision of experience that, you know, where do little lambs come from? Well, in a sense, you could say that the Creator created the lamb, but we know that really a male sheep and a female sheep, a ram and a ewe, engage in coition and produce the lamb. So the world of eros, the world of erotic attraction, is part of the world of experience. And this design, this picture of the anti-gravity dance of the woman and the man implies that sexual attraction is completely innocent. Now, you can see the top of a wall at the part of the picture that I've shown you. And there is a wall dividing top from bottom. So above the idealized world, below the real world. Now, notice the pink dress of the woman. Pink dress up here, she's flying, dancing in the sky. The man is naked or nearly naked, so he's put on a blue coat. And the man and the woman are bent over, weeping over two white corpses. An old man with a long white beard, we're going to see him again, and an old woman. And they've lived a long life together and they've died together. And this is life. This is real life. This is real life, and it's pretty good that this man and this woman are laid out together. But they're white corpses. They're completely bereft of life. And the woman in the pink dress and the man in the blue coat are bent over with weeping for this aged couple who have passed away at the same time. So these are songs of experience. And interestingly, see, the man, the old man and the old woman are laid out together. And the young couple are bent over weeping over the aged couple. And so this implies that grief is good, that grief is innocent in a sense, that that we've lost these aged parents, and we feel profound, almost grief, almost too much to bear. I love the, sharp architectural angles of this wall that divides the anti-gravitation vegetable above from the real world below. I think the most important things to understand is that it is not true that experience is deadly. Experience brings about a knowledge of death, because you can't live too long without experiencing death. But experience does not mean the exclusion of innocence. So here's songs of experience, and the experience of love, in the sense that adults love each other, and the experience of death, and adult children of the aged grieving over the death of the aged parents. So Blake creates a separate frontispiece, front of the book, for Songs of Innocence, and a separate frontispiece for Songs of Experience. But the total book is called Songs of Innocence and of Experience. And so here is that frontispiece, Songs of Innocence and of Experience. Note the bird. And this, I think, is the same bird, or very similar bird, from Songs of Experience. Notice the bird from Songs of Experience is descending, right? Coming down to earth, coming down toward earth. But the bird in the frontispiece of Songs of Experience is ascending. I'm sorry, Songs of Innocence and of Experience. Now, about 2/3 of the way down on this frontispiece, we have a very problematic little phrase here. Songs of Innocence and of Experience, showing the two contrary states of the human soul. There's, this is very complicated. Two contrary states of the human soul. So what we can say is that, speaking realistically, this little boy has a little experience, right? He's not an ideal child on a cloud who's absolutely innocent. In the real world, there's no absolute innocence. There's always innocence with some measure of experience. Two things. The little boy is experienced enough to talk to the lamb and make this explanation, which is very innocent and not highly knowledgeable. Perhaps more importantly, in the background is the cottage. No cottage, no child, right? Somebody with experience has to take care of this child, the way the aged couple raised their children. I don't think these are siblings, but the aged raise the young to adulthood, and people are gaining experience all the time. So this little subtitle, Songs of Innocence and of Experience, showing the two contrary states of the human soul, as if the human soul is made of these two ingredients or something. to say two contrary states implies that they are mutually exclusive, that there's one and then there's the other, and they don't coexist. But they do coexist because at the same time that grief is going on, exaltation is going on at the same time. There's this dividing line. So we mentally, consciously divide innocence from experience, but they really are closely interconnected. Maybe that's the significance of the spiral shape. So two contrary states of the human soul. It's very tempting to read that as saying two exclusive states. I think it would be more accurate to say two interpenetrating states, or two closely related states. See, the little boy only sees the world as himself. It's a universe of lamb. Now, it's very tempting for us adults to think that it's a universe of death. But if we think that, we're forgetting this. We're forgetting joy, right? If we think only of death, we're forgetting love. Now, so two contrary states of the human soul. They're not so contrary. Not based on these designs we're looking at. And I think Blake has a pretty low threshold of irony that we see elsewhere. So I don't know. It's a fool's errand to try to imagine what a poet's thinking. You know, we're just trying to understand what the poet's given to us. And something he gave to us is the two contrary states of the human soul. I just want to say they're not that contrary. Now, we look at the bottom of the frontispiece for Songs of Innocence and of Experience, and we see this. Here we have Adam and Eve naked, except for their aprons of fig leaves, I think it says in the King James Version. So they're wearing some plant matter around their middles to cover up their genitals. They were ashamed of their nakedness, we are told, and their nakedness, their attempt to clothe their nakedness, gave them away, betrayed them to the punitive and all-powerful Creator, who drove them with fire out of the Garden of Eden. See, so Blake is showing us that this is a big mistake. This is not true. This is not real. This is much more real than this. I mean, this happens in the real world every day. This is much more true than this. I mean, this happens, at least in the mental world, every day. I mean, it's true that in the real world, you can't defy gravity. But many have testified over the years that love is a very uplifting, I believe I can fly. Love is a very uplifting experience. This is the real world. I mean, little kids talk to their toys, talk to their pets. They love to run around naked. They love to recite what they learn. This is the real world, the adult responsibilities. Somebody's got to take care of the sheep, and somebody plays the pipe. That's experience. You're not born doing that. And seeing the child on the cloud is the real world. This is not a hallucination. This is a symbol for what thought is like, inspiration. And innocence is the guide of experience. And this is the real world. Mother and children in the book that all may read. So how am I so sure that this is the real world? Well, if two people were enveloped in fire like this, they wouldn't survive. They're obviously suffering. And what's the bird doing up here? Flying above it all. It's ascending. Okay. So I don't have any time to read the tiger with you. But let's look at the picture. Ooh, scary tiger. So, William Blake in London in the last decade of the 18th century. I'm pretty sure I can say he never saw a tiger. I think he may have known there were stripes involved. I don't think he cared whether there was any blue or pink involved, or yellow. Well, there is some yellow involved in a tiger. This tiger sure looks to be smiling to me, and it doesn't look like an evil smile. This is not a scary tiger. I'm pretty sure that if Blake had wanted to make the tiger scary, he would have done so. But the picture of the tiger is, to my eyes, not a scary, frightening tiger. The word fear appears several times in this poem, but not in the print, not in the physical image that Blake gave us. I want to look at the design. Notice that unlike the lamb, the text is chopped in two. It's chopped in perfect halves. It's perfectly symmetrical, 6 stanzas and 6 stanzas. I'm sorry, 3 stanzas and 3 stanzas. So somehow this slender stem on the left and this big tree trunk on the right have grown together in such a way as to separate the first half of the poem from the second half of the poem. And look up here, our old friend, the bird. And for a second time in Songs of Experience, the bird is ascending. In Songs of Innocence, the bird was descending, coming down to earth. But here, the bird is rising above. So I don't dare dip into the text of the poem because I don't have enough time. I promise you I'll do it next time. I will say by way of preview that the tiger is paired with the lamb. And I guess one could say that a tiger is the contrary of a lamb. So I'm honest with you, my friends. I don't know why Blake used the word contrary. He didn't check with me. So yeah, I mean, in a sense, tigers and lambs are the opposite of each other, but they're both just living creatures. So the one-way dialogue of the child and the lamb tells us a lot more about a child than it does about the lamb. And the child asks the question as to the identity of the creator, and the child knows the answer already. So it's a it's a bad use of the Socratic method to ask a question and you already know the answer. I mean, it's like, guess what I'm holding in my hand? Little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee? I know, I will tell you. The tiger asked the same question. What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? Oh my goodness. Little lamb, who made thee? Versus, contrary to, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? So the question is the same. I will tell you, little lamb, who made thee, ends up with the answer. It's a very tangled up answer. And it ends up being everything is lamb. This poem ends with a question. Similar question to the question that begins it, but not identical. So it's tempting to say that this question just ends where it begins. However, the question is subtly changed. So it doesn't answer the question, who made the tiger? But we see a process of thought, which is also profoundly invaded by emotional processes, that among which fear figures prominently. What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? So we'll talk about the text of the tiger next time. Thank you very much, my friends, and I hope to see you next time. If you want to drop in on these live recordings, you're welcome. Just contact me, maybe at appreciatingpoetry4.wordpress.com. Otherwise, I'll see you on the internet. Bye-bye.